Belle Gunness. She didn't start out as a killer. She started out as a liar. Belle Gunness was a fraud-driven female killer, and long before anyone died, money was already disappearing. Insurance paperwork, false claims, carefully crafted stories that always ended the same way, with her in trouble and someone else paying for it. For years, the fraud came first. And for years, it worked. People trusted Belle Gunness. They married her. They handed over control of their finances, without realizing they were handing over control of their lives. But fraud, it has a problem. It doesn't stay small. The lies pile up. The numbers stop adding up. Questions start getting asked. And sooner or later, someone gets too close to the truth. For a fraud-driven female killer, exposure feels worse than prison. Why? Because exposure doesn't just end the scam. It destroys the identity she's built. At that point, the logic changes. The problem is no longer the fraud. The problem is the person who knows. A spouse, a partner, someone standing between her and everything she's taken. The killing isn't emotional. It's calculated, quiet, slow, designed to look like an accident. Because this isn't rage. This is survival. And for a while, it works. Money comes in, debts disappear, sympathy replaces suspicion, until investigators stop asking how someone died and start asking who benefited. And once they follow the money, the lie collapses. Sharon Kinney, the manipulator killer. Sharon Kinney didn't pull the trigger. She didn't need to. She was a manipulator female killer, and her weapon? It wasn't a gun or a knife. It was influence. This type of female killer understands something dangerous. You don't have to commit the crime if you can convince someone else to do it for you. It starts slowly. Emotional dependence, constant reassurance, subtle pressure, disguised as love. Sharon Kinney played the victim. She rewrote reality. She convinced others that they were the only solution. Over time, the manipulation tightens. Problems are exaggerated. Enemies are invented. Violence is framed as protection. And eventually, the line is crossed, not by her, but by the person she controls. When the crime happens, she appears shocked, devastated, innocent. But behind the scenes, the groundwork was already laid. Messages, phone calls, psychological pressure, that never stops. This is what makes a manipulator female killer so dangerous. Because when the truth comes out, the weapon isn't physical, it's emotional. And once investigators trace that trail of influence, the real killer is finally exposed. Nanny Doss, the spousal killer. Marriage gave her access, and access gave her opportunity. Nanny Doss was a spousal female killer, and she didn't target strangers. She targeted the person closest to her, the one who trusted her, slept next to her, shared meals, money, and secrets. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Arguments happened, resentment built, control slowly replaced affection. And over time, marriage stopped being a bond and became a trap. The killing wasn't sudden. It was patient. A little poison at a time, illness after illness, deaths that looked natural until they started repeating. What makes a spousal female killer especially dangerous? It's how long they can operate without suspicion. Spouses are expected to die quietly. Illness is rarely questioned. And grief? Grief looks convincing when it's rehearsed. But patterns don't lie. 1 death can be coincidence. 2, raise questions. 3, become impossible to ignore. And once investigators connect the dots, the marriage that once protected her becomes the evidence that destroys her. She didn't kill with rage. She killed with patience. She didn't kill with weapons. She killed with trust. And that's what made her unstoppable. Amelia Dyer, the caregiver killer. Amelia Dyer was a caregiver female killer, and her greatest weapon was trust. She didn't look dangerous. She looked helpful. She positioned herself where no one expected harm, around children, around families in distress, around people desperate for help. That's how this type operates. At first, everything seems legitimate. Paperwork is signed, payments are exchanged, responsibility is handed over. And once the door closes, no one is watching anymore. What makes a caregiver female killer especially terrifying is how long they can operate without suspicion. When someone dies under medical care, people assume illness, they assume bad luck, they assume nature. That assumption is the shield. Deaths begin to stack up quietly, separated by time, hidden behind excuses, until someone finally notices that tragedy follows the same person everywhere she goes. And once authorities look closer, they realize the truth. The role meant to protect life was used to control it. When harm wears the mask of care, it becomes almost invisible. Mary Ann Cotton, the poisoner killer. Mary Ann Cotton was a poisoner female killer, and she never needed force. She relied on patience. This type understands something simple. Poison doesn't scream. It whispers. The pattern is always the same. Someone gets sick, then someone else, then another. Each death is explained away. Illness, weak health, bad luck. And no one questions it until the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Poisoner female killers, they thrive on repetition. They don't rush. They don't panic. They wait, because time blurs suspicion and grief clouds judgment. But poison, it leaves clues. Symptoms repeat, deaths cluster. And once investigators connect the dots, the silence collapses. This type doesn't kill in anger. She kills with patience. The quietest killers often last the longest. Pamela Hupp, the hitman planning killer. Pamela Hupp was a hitman planning female killer, and she believed distance meant safety. She didn't want blood on her hands. She wanted someone else to do it. This type doesn't act impulsively. They plan. They calculate risk. They use favors, money, and manipulation to keep themselves one step removed from the crime. The setup takes time. Targets are chosen carefully. Stories are rehearsed. Middlemen are selected, often desperate, careless, or greedy. And when the crime happens, she's nowhere near the scene. At least that's the idea, because every plan has a weak point. Someone talks, someone panics, someone leaves a trail that leads straight back to the source. And once investigators realize the killer never touched a weapon, they look at who benefited the most. That's when the distance disappears. This type believes planning equals intelligence, but planning, it also creates evidence. She didn't pull the trigger, but she wrote the script. Aileen Wuornos, the revenge-driven killer. Aileen Wuornos was a revenge-driven female killer, and every crime carried anger behind it. This type doesn't kill for money. They kill because they believe the world wronged them. Every interaction feels like a threat. Every disagreement feels like an attack. And violence becomes, in their mind, self-defense. The logic is emotional, but it feels justified to them. They see enemies everywhere. They expect betrayal. And when something goes wrong, they don't walk away. They strike back. What makes a revenge-driven female killer dangerous is unpredictability. There's no long planning phase, no careful setup, just a breaking point. And once that line is crossed, violence feels necessary, even righteous. Aileen Wuornos killed 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. Each time, she claimed self-defense. She claimed they attacked her first. She claimed she had no choice. The pattern was consistent. The victims were strangers, men she encountered along highways. And with each killing, the justification remained the same. But investigators saw something different. They saw opportunity. They saw robbery. They saw a pattern that didn't match the story she told. Because revenge-driven killers believe their own narrative. They reshape reality to fit their pain. And that belief makes them feel innocent even when the evidence says otherwise. When pain turns into justification, violence feels deserved. Dorothea Puente, the predator killer. Dorothea Puente was a predator female killer, and she hunted the invisible, the elderly, the lonely, the people no one checked on. This type looks for victims who won't be missed quickly, and often not at all. She offered shelter, food, safety, and once trust was secured, control followed. Predator female killers don't rush. They study routines. They exploit dependency. They strike when resistance is lowest. And after the death, they erase the person quietly. Bank accounts, mail, paperwork, as if the victim never existed. Dorothea Puente ran a boarding house in Sacramento, California. Between the 1980s and her arrest in 1988, at least 7 victims were found buried in her yard. All of them were elderly. Most had no close family. Many were living on government assistance. She cashed their checks. She forged their signatures. She kept collecting money long after they were gone. What made her especially dangerous was how normal everything appeared. Neighbors saw nothing suspicious. Social workers saw a caring landlady. Authorities had no reason to investigate until someone finally noticed that tenants kept disappearing. But disappearance leaves questions. And once investigators realized multiple people vanished under the same roof, the predator loses her cover. They started digging in the garden, and the bodies told the truth she'd been hiding. The most dangerous killers choose victims no one is watching. Karla Homolka, the accomplice killer. Karla Homolka was an accomplice female killer, and she never acted alone. But that doesn't make her innocent. This type of female killer doesn't lead to violence. They enable it. They stand aside someone dangerous, someone violent, someone already willing to cross the line. And instead of stopping it, they participate. At first, the role feels smaller. Helping cover things up, keeping secrets, looking the other way. They convince themselves they're not the real criminal, that they're just involved, not responsible. But involvement is a choice. Over time, the line between observer and participant disappears. Plans are discussed openly. Boundaries are pushed. Morality erodes. And eventually, the accomplice becomes essential. They help plan. They help execute. They help clean up. What makes an accomplice female killer so disturbing is how normal they appear. They smile. They cooperate. They blend into everyday life. And because they're not the main aggressor, they often believe they'll escape full blame. But partnerships don't last. Someone panics, someone talks, someone tries to save themselves. And when the truth finally comes out, the excuse disappears. Because standing beside violence and doing nothing is still participation. She didn't lead the crime, but without her, it wouldn't have happened. Jodi Arias, the attention-seeking killer. Jodi Arias was an attention-seeking female killer, and for this type, the crime is only part of the story. The real addiction is attention. They crave visibility, sympathy, recognition. Being ignored feels unbearable, but being talked about feels powerful. This type of killer often lives dramatically. Extreme emotions, unstable relationships, a constant need to be seen, heard, and validated. And when that attention starts slipping away, panic sets in. The crime becomes a reset button. Suddenly, everyone is watching again. News cameras, courtrooms, public opinion. They retell the story over and over, changing details, shaping narratives, trying to control how they're perceived. Distant. Risk feels manageable. By the time a life is taken, it doesn't feel like a leap. It feels like the next step. What makes this type terrifying is how ordinary the beginning looks. No warning signs, no sudden transformation, just a gradual descent that no one notices until it's too late. This pattern appears across many cases. Belle Gunnis started with insurance fraud before progressing to murder. Marion Cotton began with theft before turning to poison. The progression is consistent, and once the escalation reaches murder, it rarely stops at one, because when the final line is crossed, going back feels impossible. The psychological barrier that once prevented killing has been eroded step by step, crime by crime, until murder becomes just another option. Most killers don't start as monsters. They become them one step at a time.